Hi, my name is Tyler Stallman, and today I want to talk to you about the Canon 5D Mark IV. I've had it for about 2 months now, and I've been waiting about 2 years, I don't know how many years, for this camera to be released like we all have. The 5D Mark III was extremely versatile, worked really well for all of us, but it was starting to age, and since so many other brands were iterating quickly, it was getting frustrating waiting. But here it is. I've spent about 8 weeks with it now, and I want to tell you what I thought of it. For context, the things that I usually shoot are lifestyle and fashion, which is mostly for my wife's blog, anibi.net. So we travel a lot, take thousands and thousands of photos every month. Yeah, so I have some strong opinions about this. I'm also the head of video over at Stocksy.com, so I spend a lot of time looking at footage and thinking about the quality of it. And we'd all hoped that Canon would use this as a chance to bring their DSLRs back into the video world, but based on the 1DX, we shouldn't be surprised that they are not doing that. That is not their game plan, and this is not really a video camera. It works great for it. We've used it for a couple of projects. Me and Alan, who's manning the camera right now, we shot it along with the A7R II, which is the camera being used right now, and they actually matched up pretty well. The way that they looked best together was actually using HDR mode on the Canon, which I haven't seen many people talking about yet. It's still kind of weird. I don't know if I'm going to commit to using it all the time, but it was the only way that I could get the dynamic range that I want out of a modern DSLR. Using S-Log2 or other log formats and so many other video cameras, you can get tons of dynamic range and make these small cameras look really beautiful. The Canon doesn't do that out of the box, and HDR mode only works in 30 frames per second, 1080. The 4K options are not options, as far as I'm concerned. It uses a really old codec called Motion JPEG, and the files it creates are way too big. I think I heard the other day that they're bigger than certain RED files that are RAW. So Canon didn't want to make this video camera. I'm sorry. It'll still work great for YouTubers or for personal home videos, but for filmmakers, it's just not what you need. I got a list of details as well that I want to go over, and these are some of the things that I love and don't love so much about specifics in the camera. First, Wi-Fi. This is really small, you'd think, but it's actually a big deal to me because I shoot a lot of stuff on the road. I need to upload things mobily, and something that was really fun lately is I've been doing Instagram stories, uploading directly from Wi-Fi video, and stuff like that is great. I love doing it. It had to happen. Thanks for adding it, Canon. GPS. This isn't on any other cameras I've had except my iPhone, but honestly, I love seeing the little points fill out in my Lightroom map. And I don't know if it's important for anything, but I just like filling out all my metadata. I'm really glad it's there. I keep it on all the time. Auto ISO has some new arithmetic to it so that it can calculate based on lens sizes and shutter speeds and combine that information to get a more accurate minimum shutter speed. So you can set it to faster or slower instead of just a fixed number. This means that Auto ISO is just a lot more useful than it used to be, because often you'd have to set it to one fixed minimum shutter speed and then let it do the rest of the work, and often it would make really stupid decisions. Adding USB 3, that's a small detail, but you know what, if you shoot tethered, it's not such a small detail. Okay, this one's actually a bigger deal. It's negative. The battery life is worse, noticeably worse. Canon said it was something like 10%. I feel like it's 30%. I am now going through more than a battery in each shoot. Like a full battery will get drained in a day of shooting, whereas it used to be that I could usually just, by the end of the day, my battery's almost dead. Now it is completely dead, and I need to replace it before the day is over. That's too bad, but you know what, it's probably worth it for the other features I just mentioned. Also, the touchscreen, this was something I thought would be a bit of a gimmick. I wasn't that excited about it. Now that it's here, I can't go back. I am touching the screen of my Sony all the time, which does nothing at all. And another part of that is the facial tracking in live shooting. So it used to be that, if I'm gonna get low, I'd have to do this and keep my knees bent the whole time. Now a lot of the time, I'm just holding my camera lower and watching the facial tracking on the screen. So I don't even need to change focus points. It is automatically tracking faces. Sometimes I can correct it with my thumb. It's so much better to shoot that way. The only downside is this really should be a flip screen. One feature that got a lot of hype is dual pixel RAW. And like I said, I've had this camera 2 months and I haven't used it yet because I don't really care. This might be something important in the future. This type of technology will be really influential for photography in the long run. This version doesn't seem to make a very big difference. In all the tests that I've seen, the amount of focus adjustment you can do is really minimal. So I'm going to wait till somebody does it very differently before I start playing around with it. A detail that jumped out at me as soon as I shot with this camera is the sound of the shutter. I actually checked to make sure that I didn't have it on silent because it's so much quieter than the 5D Mark III shutter. There is a mechanical buffer that slows the mirror mechanism as it moves to reduce the vibration, makes it a lot quieter and sounds so much better. Silent is just as loud as it was before, but the standard shutter is now much quieter and I love it. I can't go back.
Finally got my hands on the long-awaited Canon 5D Mark IV. And as I do with my other cameras, I'm going to provide a general overview. We're going to put this thing through the test and I'm going to level set how this is going to work. So to begin with, I'm going to provide what I feel are a list of key features of this camera. And then I'm going to put it to the test. We're going to go out and shoot a bunch of photos on this nice day back here in the woods, maybe get some action shots in. And I really want to get into some night photography with this camera because I do want to test the low light capabilities and how this camera performs. And then when it's all said and done, I'm going to give you my list of pros and cons, and then I'm going to give you my general thoughts on this camera. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right in with what I feel are the important features. To begin with, this camera is a 30 megapixel sensor. Now this is a significant upgrade to the 5D Mark III, and hopefully that'll yield some better results with the images. The other thing is the native ISO on this camera is ranging from 100 to 32,000, and it's expandable up to 102,000 and down to 50. It'll also shoot in continuous mode at 7 frames a second. It has 61 autofocus points, of which 21 are cross-type. The other thing Canon has touted about this camera is the dual pixel autofocus system, and we will be sure to put that to the test and see just how well that performs. It'll shoot 4K video at 30 frames a second, 1080p at 60 frames a second, and 720 at 120 frames a second. Comes with a built-in mic and headphone jack, which is to be expected. Also has built-in time-lapse features. It also has one compact slot here on the side and one SD slot. Has a very similar look and feel to the 5D Mark III, although it is 50 grams lighter. If you look at the top up in here, it's another thing they added to the 5D Mark IV. Now this is not a built-in flash. These cameras typically don't have them, but what this is GPS, Wi-Fi, and near-field communication. So that's the reason for the bump up here on the top. The other thing this camera has is dual pixel RAW feature and touchscreen here on the back. Now with all that said, let's go ahead and put this camera to the test and see just what it's made of. I'm really enjoying this camera. Been shooting with it all day and it feels good, it's solid. The focus is locked on, no trouble there. It's very reminiscent of the 5D Mark III. Keeping in mind, I shoot with a lot of Nikon equipment, so for me, it's a pleasant surprise. I really enjoy this camera. After spending time with this camera, I'm gonna move right into my list of pros, cons, and my overall thoughts. Now keep in mind, it's just my opinion, but hopefully it'll help you out. I'm gonna jump right into my list of pros, so here we go. To begin with, I like the joystick feature here on the back. The thumb rests easily on it, and I found this to be beneficial to help me select my autofocus points. Next up, I like the programmatic button beneath the joystick here. Now you can't assign anything and everything to it, but for me, I assigned my ISO, and I was able to put my thumb on it, use my index finger at the top, and quickly adjust my ISO. So for me, that was a nice little feature and benefit. The other thing I like about this camera is the dual pixel autofocus system. During my testing, I had no trouble in tracking subjects with this camera, and I attribute it to their autofocus system. So that's a nice job and it's a nice benefit, and that's a big plus in my column. What else did I like? I like the built-in time-lapse feature. Now I've tested this with other cameras and I think it works well on this camera, and I like the programmatic features behind it. The camera itself can render that time-lapse inside the body, or it can record the separate images and you can post-process them yourself. So I like that feature. Next up, color rendering. I think Canon does a great job at that. They've done it with all their cameras. The colors appear to be spot on in my opinion, so they did a good job here. I also like the low light, high ISO performance behind this camera. During my night photography, I thought the resulting images were great. I was able to run around at 1/60th of a second, run my ISO on all the way up to 12,000, I think, in that range, and the resulting images were great, in my opinion. The other thing I like is the touchscreen here on the back. So, just like any other smartphone that's out there, if you're using an iPhone or an Android device, it's very natural, and it can swipe, you can pinch to zoom, all that. It feels good, works well, and it was a nice job. Now, on to my list of cons. Here we go. This screen here on the back, I really wish it articulated. I don't think it's asking too much. I know a lot of high-end professional cameras don't have articulating screens, but if you use cameras with articulating screens, I'll tell you what, you get spoiled by it pretty quick. And if you're doing crowd shots, you're holding the camera up high, it's nice to have that screen tilt down at you. Or if the camera's down low, you can tilt it up. It's just a nice feature. I wish they would have put it on here. They didn't. So on my list, it's in my con category. What else? The 4K video. Now, I'm not quite sure what Canon did here, but they're using an old, antiquated codec that's using Motion JPEGs. The resulting files are huge. Just seems a little impractical in my opinion. In addition, there's a crop factor, 1.64 when you shoot 4K. So, this is a full sensor camera. I wish they would have taken more advantage of it, but it is what it is. Now, most people will say this is a professional still camera, and I get that. But in this day and age, if you plan to leverage this for 4K video, you may want to think again. What else? Well, for me, if you take a look at this right here, it's the card slots here on the side. Now, they do have dual card slots, and I appreciate that. One's compact, one's SD. I wish they would have had dual high-speed SD slots in here. It's just me, though, and again, it's just my list, so it's in my con category. The other thing is, they talk about the dual pixel RAW feature. Now, it's something that Canon touts quite a bit, and it records the A and B channels, doubles up the size, and it's supposed to give you additional benefits when you go to post-process. Now, in my testing, I really didn't notice that. I noticed a very slight modification in the bokeh and the focal point, but in my opinion, it's not worth the effort, so for me, it's in my con category. Again, you can kind of take that for what it's worth. One last notable here is this. Now, I shoot in RAW, but I did test this camera with the JPEGs coming right out. And for me, I thought they were a little bit soft, and I attribute that to the aliasing filter. Now, some of the competition cameras like the Nikon D5, D500, and I believe the D5500, they removed the aliasing filter. What's nice about that is it makes for sharper images, in my opinion. I believe that's what's causing these images to be just a little bit soft. I wish they would have removed the aliasing filter in this camera. Again, it's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Now, on to my general thoughts and summary of this camera. I hope my list of cons didn't outweigh the list of pros, because this is a solid camera. It's a great general purpose professional camera, in my opinion. It feels meaty. It feels like it's got a lot of quality to it. I think that Canon did a great job in improving the overall dynamic range, the image quality, and the low light performance. Now, I think there are a lot of people that were hoping Canon would do a little more. I mean, this is the long-awaited successor to the D3 or the D5 Mark III, and I think that they were hoping for a little more, but keep in mind this is still, in my opinion, a vast improvement over the Mark III. Now, who's this camera for? If you already have invested in the Canon quality lenses, or you have previous bodies, you could take those previous bodies if you want, take your 5D Mark III, Mark II, sell the body, and you want to upgrade, I think it's a great upgrade. Now, if you're new to the world of professional photography and you're looking for your first body and you're not invested with the Canon lenses, you may want to look at the competition. I might suggest the Nikon D810 or the D750. Why? Because they're a fraction of the cost here, and I think they compete on every level with this camera.